Welcome back to another episode of State of Wrestling. We are into the Matt Stats Show, episode 4 today, joined by statistical extraordinaire Glenn Gormley. Glenn, today we are diving into the world of correlative stats. And before we drive people nuts with how nerdy that sounds, we're just looking at the comparisons between high school and college. And as we call this, your title here as we bring up our spreadsheet, or excuse me, our PowerPoint, will be simply going from high school to the NCAA. And before we get into the actual meat of the details, this is just on the boys and men's side because we have a situation like freestyle is the women's college style, while in high school they mostly pretty much wrestle folk style. So there's not enough stats and data, and the styles are different, so the correlations and similarities do not exist. But Glenn, before we get into the meat and potatoes of it, we're recording this just after Thanksgiving. How was your first set of holiday munchies?
Oh, it was great. I don't have to worry about making weight and weighing in anymore, so I had a good time.
Also, I want to give a local shout out because the NWCA is based in Manheim, Pennsylvania, which is the 717 just outside of Lancaster. It's in Lancaster County. So today in the mail, or yesterday in the mail, I got a shirt from Kerry Regner, the head coach at Millersville, which is right there just outside of Lancaster, right off Millersville Pike. I actually used to live off of Millersville Pike in Lancaster when I worked for the NWCA, about 8 miles from Manheim. So I could not wear the shirt and not give a reference to the NWCA's neighborhood there. So Coach Kerry Regner at Millersville Division II program. As you said, you've got some friends, kids that went there.
Sure, I
Zach
went to
Pincus.
watch Zach Pincus wrestle many times when he was wrestling in Millersville a few years ago.
Yeah,
It's a
and of
nice
course,
program. Wagner was not coaching there then, but we wished him well.
the Pincus name. If you follow Glenn, he's a William and Mary guy. So there's a tie in there with Billy as well, obviously.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Billy was the best boss I ever had.
Well, moving on, because today we're not talking about bosses, we're talking about stats. And again, as we're going to dig into this with an analytical look, Glenn, quickly just to refresh people, what is your background in statistics and what has drawn you into researching things like this?
Okay, my background statistics. When I was the assistant coach, for Billy Pincus at William and Mary in the '80s, I went to get my MBA, and I wound up concentrating on finance and mainly on stats. And I wrote my grad thesis on stats in baseball. So 2 years ago, Moyer asked me to write a book on stats in wrestling because, like he said, to me, I'm the only old coach he knows that has a master's degree in stats. So that's how I got this responsibility. But it turns out now, of course, Jason, we're turning this into the Matt Stat Show here, our podcast monthly. So um, that's how I got in the background of this.
Well, we've talked last episode heavily on the growth of women's wrestling. So while there are no women's stats as far as the high school to college correlation here in this episode, if you want a crash course in the growth of women's wrestling, you can go back to the previous episode available on all the podcast platforms with the NWCA to talk about what we've seen with the growth of women's wrestling. That was a really
Well,
informative show.
yeah, I mean, how about this? Last month when we did the show, there was 108 women's programs. Now there's 113.
Here's what we got, and let's kick off the things with what we know is the best predictor of future performance is past performance. And sometimes you look at this title, wait a minute, what about the diamond in the rough? Well, the diamond in the rough is a great story, but statistically, it is not. It's more of an outlier, and we're gonna see that today. And what do the stats tell you about that kind of statement?
What I did here was this study involves PA, quarter semis and finals, both AAA and AA in California. Okay. And it also involves NCAA, the same rounds. Okay. So you basically have some of the best states there, and of course, the best college with NCAA. What this shows is it's the same sport. It's mainly the same kids. You do have some outliers there, but not many. The kids just got older. Okay. And just like anything else, Jason, if you're the high school class valedictorian, you're probably going to do good in college. Okay. If you're, a really good singer as a 10-year-old kid, you're probably going to be a better singer at 20 and 30, etc. Okay. So this study really shows that it's a lifelong preparation thing here. It just doesn't happen overnight. Okay. If you look at this, there's only 2.9% of all high school kids go to the NCAA. Less than 1% go on to Division One. And 0.3% of high school kids wind up making the quarterfinals in the NCAA. Those are the real diamonds in the rough. That is a really good wrestler. Okay. Um, so that is why we did this. And it's the best predictor of future performance by and large is past performance.
When we look at that, though, it's almost like you have to kind of look at it in reverse order. It's not like saying, okay, you're a four-time state champ, you're going to be great in college. What it's saying is those college kids were actually, they did better in the past. So it's not necessarily, you're going to be great from high school to college. It's looking at the college kids going, how good were they in hindsight? So
Exactly.
that's the one thing. It's not saying you're going to be great because you're good now. Granted, they're on a course for that. And again, those outliers, like we before we talked about Tervel Delagna, for example, was he wrestled three years in high school, never won a Texas high school state title, went Division II at Nebraska Kearney, eventually made his way to be a multiple-time world medalist, and recently was actually awarded the bronze medal because the guys in front of him were cheaters in London. So we get that type of great story, and then we also get the guy that was, okay, I'm a one-time state champ, or I'm a, you don't. My whole theory is you don't have to be a four-timer to be a college All-American. Again, statistically, your better kids are set up to be better. When you look at the rankings, you can see that. Now,
and I could explain this later with the exact correlation when we get into it. But it's not a absolute rule. It's not a +1 correlation, but it's a very strong correlation to the kids who are good in college or good in high school.
moving on. So one of the fun things about the statistics is looking at points per match, and we look at college versus high school. A couple, again, caveats is we have one extra minute in college. We also have this thing called riding time, which, speaking personally here, not for the association, I hate riding time. But that being said, what do we have here in terms of what you found with the scoring based on looking at those high school states compared to the NCAA championships?
Sure. Well, what we see here, Jason, is in high school it's 6.7 to 2.2 basically, and in college it's almost 6.7 to 2.6. It's the same match. It's the same scoring, the same margin. Obviously, college has one more minute, but as we learned in two shows ago, a lot of that extra minute was spent in the funk.
Spaghetti wrestling, as Pat McCormick would explain it.
Yes. And here's an example of that we're spending more time in the funk in college. We have 5.3 scoring moves in high school and 5.4 in college. This does not include stalling or riding time because one's a referee's judgment, the other one's an accumulation award. So the extra minute is set on setups and in spaghetti wrestling, as Dr. McCormick would say.
Now, with the falls, we look at the NCAA championships, and we look at one thing is I learned this at the Virginia Duels years ago. We have 10 bouts in college. We have 14 in high school. Some states actually have 15, but we look at that, and we set rounds at 2 hours, and we joke that you could set your watch by the times at the Virginia Duels. Sometimes you see a 10-bout college match go the full 2 hours, and then you have a 14-bout high school duel go an hour. And a lot of that is based on the percentage of pins. And depending on the level of competition, you see a lot more falls in the dual meets with you can get a first-year kid versus a state champion. You're looking at this, of course, we've got state tournament stats in 2 power states. So you got a lot less of those first-year kids, especially in California where it's a one-class system. So I find that this stat to be a little bit closer than probably the general population where you would have your state champ meeting a first-year kid in a dual meet. And this is a tournament setting. So these numbers are probably, you're looking at that top section of quality wrestlers in these states, comparing them again to the top tier of college wrestlers,
Correct.
which is Division I.
Correct. That's exactly right. That's one of the reasons you get the same percentage thing here. The same kids that are wrestling each other, the best kids in high school, go on to wrestle each other in college. It's not a crazy thought that, and here's another example where the high school, 7% of matches go overtime and NCAA 9% go overtime.
And also I look at this and I think that is because the disparity, and yes, we talk about the state tournaments where the data is coming from, but you are less likely to get a green wrestler at the Division I level than you are at high school state. You can, again, draw the kid from the weak region. You can draw a kid with 2 years experience versus that hammer. I mean, it's like whoever Zahid Valencia drew in the first round, hey, thanks for coming out. One of those things.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, you see closer matches, tighter matches with the higher level, of course, as the degree of quality increases, as does the tightness of matches. So no surprise there with the correlation between the elite high school and the elite college wrestlers. Hail
Yeah, now
Marys,
here's a
headlocks, Glenn, headlocks.
headlocks. What this Jason reminds me of all this Hail Mary and upper body stuff is, I'm a big Vol football fan. I go to the games, and there's always some rednecks usually sitting next to me drinking bourbon, yelling, "Throw the ball deep, throw the ball deep." Well, for 4 years, we had a quarterback who couldn't throw anything. Okay. So why the hell would he throw the ball deep, right? You really have to have somebody extraordinary to do that. So it's just really not a move that's a go-to move. Okay. So what I learned from this when I wrote the book is dance with who brung you. Okay. If you're if you're practicing and it works in a single leg, a double leg in the practice room, that's what you are. Of course, you're going to have some headlock guy. Okay. You have some of these guys that are really good at it. Okay. And it really is great to watch, but they're far and few between.
In situations here, and we joke headlock. Of course, there's a lot of techniques that you can use late in the match that in your bag of tricks, and it's one of those things like if you've got it in your bag of tricks and you use it, chances are it's more likely to be effective on a kid who is again not near your level. But sometimes I was doing a match in lacrosse a couple weeks ago, and Austin Gomez is down late and he goes double unders inside trip, and that's you can look at that as a leg. How you want to classify
Yeah, who
that
knows how you
move
qualify that? Yeah.
because you're going upper body, but you're also tripping with the back leg. So it's one of those things like there's that move. He has it in his bag of tricks. It's something he practices. It wasn't just a YOLO move. Like, all right, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try a lat drop that I don't even set up kind of thing. It's those type of moves. Like, try something, do something. Now there is the chance sometimes we all go back to Rob Roan hitting the cement mixer, but again, high percentage move for him. He's a Lehigh Valley guy.
NCAA wrestling.
Know?
It was no question that was the most exciting move. And so, well, I wasn't there all 75. Most of the 75 I was there, but not all.
Come on,
of them.
Glenn, you've been there all 75. You know it.
It feels like it now, Jason.
You saw Gray Simons win his first. You know it.
Well, yeah, my old coach Gray Simons.
So there's again some statistics on the Hail Mary. So like again, they call it the Hail Mary because I mean literally you brought up football. How many times do you see these at the end of halves and it makes Sports Center. It makes Sports Center when it works, but I mean low percentage.
Yeah, Jason, of all the football games I've been at, the first one I ever saw live was Thanksgiving Saturday at the end of half. It was the first one I've ever seen live that worked.
Mm.
Yeah, and I'll tell you how the term Hail Mary comes from. It was the Roger Staubach game against the Vikings to get to the Super Bowl, okay? And he said he just threw the ball as far as he could and said a few Hail Marys, and the Cowboys caught it because Roger was a real religious guy. And
that sets up the stage, too, for years of Vikings disappointment because
yes, it did.
We live that here in this house. I'm not a Vikings fan, but my daughter and my wife have gravitated towards the purple and gold, and it's been sad sometimes here, especially after recently losing to the winless Detroit Lions.
Yes. And one of the things you saw on that slide before that, all the Hail Marys were defensive points.
So you're saying counters in this situation? The points being scored
like
is
I'm trying to headlock you, Jason. You slip it,
and I'm going right to my back, or you're giving up two. Okay,
exactly. Yeah. So that's okay. So anyway, on to the next situation here. In high school and college, we're talking men, of course, now, the takedown points per match are almost identical, 4.67 to 4.61, and it correlates into 53% of all points for high school and 50% for college.
Anything about this surprise you?
No, not at all. Okay. Then when you get to which takedowns are the most common, single legs are the most common. They're 57% of all takedowns in high school and 59 in college. And the percentage of all points, 30% are from single legs in high school and 28% in college. And the reason I think, Jason, that none of this surprises me, and it might surprise other people, is because as being a stats guy, I've been living on the best predictor of future performance is past performance basically my whole life. There's a reason I don't gamble. When gambling became prevalent in Atlantic City, yeah, I would take the free bus down there, but I wouldn't go to the casinos and gamble, because I just knew the system would win. So
house wins, right? House is set up to win.
Yeah, how do you think they built those nice casinos, right? So and I just see it as the same in the going from high school to college, that this does not surprise me.
Now, again, caveat to this is I know Ben Askren did a drill down. He actually had his club kids go and watch a bunch of film and look at the actual techniques within the single leg. So, is it the sweep? Is it the high C? Is it obviously we get into terminology. What is a head outside single? What is a head inside single? It means it's different worded depending on what part of the country you're in. So, there are nuances to the technique with the single leg to consider. But when you're hitting that one leg, that's exactly what you're looking at here.
Yeah, Jason, one of the things in stats, and it's used a lot in the biological evolutionary stats world, is it's called combinatory inflation. And when I'm wrestling you and we're changing this move, we're changing that move, and all of a sudden you have an inside tie, then I do this and you do that, it's almost impossible then to determine anything mathematical because you have what's called information indigestion. There's too much. So I restricted it down to takedowns, single legs, double legs, and stuff like that. And then if you want to get good at this, you're going to have to find a coach or somebody like Ben Askren that really knows what they're doing on this, you know? So, okay. Um, as far as percentage of clean takedowns, this is singles and doubles combined. 53% of all takedowns in high school are clean and only 39% in college. That shows you the difference in how much more funk there is in college, which we showed in episode 2, 2 points in a cloud of funk, to paraphrase Woody Hayes.
All right. So, and then to clarify what you mean by clean, clean means, okay, I'm going in, I'm hitting a single leg or I'm hitting a double and I'm driving right through and I'm finishing. There's no scrambling. There's no, chain wrestling where I'm switching off to a different technique. This is
Correct. No
first
chain
shot,
wrestling.
first score, right?
Yep. No chain wrestling. Correct, Jason.
Again, information indigestion. I like that. I feel like that's like every day in my social media feeds.
Yeah, that's what social media is because everyone's telling what they have for lunch.
That's another statistical argument. Now we look at the highest level at the Division I championships. Of course, the most recent tournament with fans. We didn't have a whole lot in St. Louis in 2021, but 2019 we had a good show in Pittsburgh. And what did you find out here?
Okay, what we found out is 61% of all the time in the NCAA tournament was spent in the neutral position, which includes all that funk wrestling. Okay, because nobody's in control yet. So it just shows you how much time, because in theory, the first period's 3, then the second and third period are 2 minutes, and somebody might be on top or bottom in those things to start the period. Okay, because the majority of the time somebody's choosing either top or bottom. So it just shows you how people get out and how much time is spent in that funk.
Have you given any thought to going back and looking at what this stat would look like prior to, let's just call it what it is, the Dean Heil rule? I guess when they took the funk out, where you basically the neutral danger zone count came into play to eliminate that staying on your back from neutral and not giving up any points. Do you think that would cause any statistical relevant change in how these points were scored in these situations?
I think it could cause a slight amount more in the neutral position. Okay. And what I mean by slight amount, this is another numbers thing. Let's just say that thing goes up to 67%, which is 2/3 instead of 61. That's 6 percentage points more, but that's a 10% increase because 6 is 10% of 60. So that would be a lot more time after the higher rule.
Right, and again, we're talking about what being just because you remember it happening a couple times doesn't mean it's consistent across. I mean, people remember outliers. They remember the one Hail Mary that scores, the one, big
Correct.
headlock, the one cement mixer in the finals. So again, the outliers are what people remember, but they're not always statistically significant.
Correct. They're outliers for a reason.
Moving on, more scrambles. This is the fun stuff.
Okay, yeah, this is a great thing because I really was interested in this. The offensive wrestler wins the scramble 4 times as often in high school and 2 times as often in NCAA. Okay, what I mean by that is we're wrestling. If I shoot on you and we go into a scramble, Jason, if we're in high school, the offensive wrestler is going to score 80% of the time. So you still have an advantage of being the aggressive wrestler. Okay. And in college, it's 68%. Okay. And what I mean by 2 times, if I'm getting 67% and you're getting 33, I'm getting it twice as often as you are. And 80% is 80 to 20. It's a 4 time. So the interesting thing about this is it really shows you to be the aggressive one. Now, do we have people like Yanni D who seem like he can defend anybody at any time?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah,
Sammy
we do.
Sasso, another great example, even
Yeah.
though they just wrestled this weekend. Now, this is the one thing that, shoot first, score first, the aggressive wrestler wins. And this is something that, like, I saw somebody else do a breakdown on, like, I think it might have been Andy Vogel, the head coach at Hiram, went through. I think he did it in, I want to say 2008, 2009. There was an era where he was doing all the championship side matches, and how many guys scored first, just from the D1 championships on the top side. And this, it tends to mirror the actual stats when you look at everything through it, that first score wins, because at least in my estimation of what I know about this sport of wrestling, is that means the guy wrestling from behind is wrestling from behind. He's not as comfortable
Yes.
as the guy who's in the lead.
Yeah, and the best, and also when you talk about this, we learned it's about in high school and college, around roughly 9 points per match. Okay. So if it's a 9 point match, you need five to win, right? Okay. So if you already get the first takedown, you get two of those. So it's not a real surprise mathematically that the guy that scores the first takedown wins. Just like in baseball, the team that scores first um, usually wins if you control for the visiting team gets the bat first. Whereas that's different in basketball because there's so many more points scored in basketball.
Yeah, and
You
of
know, the,
course, in the NBA, you get 5,000 timeouts, and you get the ball in
yeah,
the other half of the, because it's they get the ball on the other side of the court because of competition in the final 2 minutes. But anyway, you have to
yeah,
look that up. Look up that rule. It's like, why don't they go court to court anymore? Anyway, first, we're not talking basketball stats here, even though I
yeah.
used to do a lot of that. But again, first point scores. So there's an when you see a 0-0 score in the first period, you're like, man, who wants to win this match? Apparently, nobody.
Well, yeah, we'll get onto that in a later show about points of the thing. But one of the interesting things is when Soriano beat Dayton Fix from Ohio State, Soriano did get the first takedown. It was in overtime.
Well, those guys don't really score any takedowns against one another
Yeah,
anyway. I think we saw that
yeah.
on with the who's
And
number
if
one
you get the
card.
takedown in overtime, you automatically win.
Yeah. All right, moving forward now, we had a table of numbers here. So if you are listening, Glenn's going to have to explain what we're actually looking at, because we've got
Okay,
six
I'll do
total
my
areas of scoring here in
I'll
comparisons to high
do
school
my
and
best
college.
to explain this to the people listening to the podcast on the way to work or wherever they go. It has a list of all the categories of scoring in both high school men and NCAA men. Number one is takedown in both. Number two is escape. Number three is back. Number four is reverse. In college, then comes riding time, but we throw that out because high school doesn't have it. So then comes stalling, then comes illegal. Okay. So it shows you how correlated these things are. Um, that it's the same sport, the same kids. They're just 1 to 4 or 5 years older. That's the only
And
difference in this.
And looking at this, you
Oh,
take out the riding time, because again, there's no equivalent in high school, but they are in order. It's takedown, escapes, near falls, reversals, stalling, and illegal holds. Those are the points in how they match up. And of course, logic tends to dictate. Yeah, okay, if the most optimum scoring sequence is a takedown, naturally the escape should come next, because it's you're going to get out probably more so than you get near fall from those situations, at least with the good kids, because even as the higher levels you get the takedowns a lot harder to turn the better wrestlers when they're hitting head to head. So again, logic and the statistics kind of validate the logic here.
yes, it's very validated by statistics, and if you're looking for something different, you're not going to find something different in the sport. Okay, the wrestlers are better, obviously, a national champ's better than a regular high school kid. Now, with correlation, I'll try to explain this as best I can. It doesn't matter whether you're here, there, wherever you may be. You don't really need a screen to look at this part.
But what it
It's a
is, the Pearson correlation. Okay, so
person, yeah,
you're talking percent. Okay, so this is where it. I'm looking at it and it says Pearson to me. I'm okay. Anyway, Drew Pearson. What? No, we're talking about Roger
yeah.
Staubach earlier. Is another Cowboy reference. So perfect linear relationship, opposite linear relationship, and linear relationship. What are these terms in relation to what this correlation is, and what is it exactly?
Okay, the correlation number runs from -1 to +1. Okay, and zero shows no linear relationship. I'll try to give you an example as best I can. Okay, a negative correlation would be temperature and amount of snow. Okay, as it gets warmer, it's not going to snow. Okay, A positive correlation would be calories consumed and miles run in that day. Okay, because as you run more miles, you consume more calories. Um, a zero correlation would be the topic that Jason, Glenn, and Kevin Hazard, or I'm sorry, he's ill today, he's not able to make it. He'll be here for the next month's show, though. The topic that us three are talking about and the final score of the Patriots game. There's no correlation between the two because it's irrelevant. Okay. So now, if you have a screen there, what this is the x-axis and the y-axis. The x-axis is high school male scoring, and the y-axis is NCAA men scoring. And there's a dot there, a bullet point there along the graph for each scoring category. The one on the total right-hand upper corner is the points per match. Okay, the next one in the middle is the takedown scoring, etc. So you see how tight along that line going almost at a 45-degree angle there. Okay. I know the colors aren't real good here, but you can see how tight they are to that line. And that shows how close these things are correlated to a perfect correlation.
So again, just again for the visually impaired here, are the ones listening. We've got 8.8 to 8.78, so we're pretty tight there. 4.67, 4.61, 2.05, 2.58. I mean, we're not. I mean, 1.2 to 0.9, 0.79 to 0.41, and then 0.8 to 0.19. So everything is within. I think what the biggest disparity might be. What we've got like a 0.5. When we look at
I
the
think the
second item.
0.79 and 0.41, yeah, percentage wise,
I mean,
yeah.
we're talking like.
Yeah.
So what does that mean when they're that close? That there is
Well,
it means there is a close correlation.
oh my God, it means there's almost a positive one correlation. Just so you know, the x-axis is always the first number. And the reason it says 8.78 there for the colleges because we took out the riding time there
Mhm.
because there is no riding time in high school. We had to compare apples to apples. So what this means from this is you're learning how close to positive one correlated they are. If you go to the next screen, Jason, you can see for the ones that can see, it's 0.9956. Okay, that's as close to positive 0.1 as positive 1.0 as you can get. What this means is these two tables of numbers are very, very close to totally correlated.
Mhm.
So we can learn from this that going from high school to college, as far as the scoring is concerned, is as close to positive one as can be. There will be some outliers in specific matches, of course, and in specific wrestlers. But as a whole in the sport, these two sports are the same thing. This one sport is the same, just different kids, different age.
Now, one thing I gotta ask in terms of looking at this, and this is just scoring. So this isn't about outcomes. So it's like you've got all the stats. So if a match ends by a fall, you've still got that data. So it's not like only matches ending in decisions. This is every match that we're looking at, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, wonder what the average score is going to be if I start tracking the dual meet scores across all levels. But I'd have to get all. I mean, just looking at track wrestling, for example, or the school websites, being okay. Well, that's 8-5. That's 8-5. That's it. What do you think the average score in a dual meet would be? Pretty close to correlating with this if we're looking at general college and high school scores, or would you expect that correlation to be a little wider based on the disparity in talent, perhaps?
The
at
correlation would be a little wider. Yes,
okay.
Jason. No question.
I look at these things. I'm like, where are the trends? Because again, we're not a gambling sport, so you don't need to look at the trends to figure out who's scoring what and things of that nature. So that's one thing we can look at. Now, the differences that we touched on, the 7-minute match, of course, the riding time. Now, point 3 here on the screen, high school boys go off the mat 80% more often than a match and more than 100% per minute. Explain those numbers and what they mean and how you came up with them.
Okay, what I did is I counted in all these matches I watched the amount of times they go off the mat. Okay. And high school goes off the mat. And we're going to discuss a lot of these further in more shows down the road,
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have time to do everything in one show. In high school, they go off the mat 80% more often in a match. But because the match is 1 minute longer in college, they're going off the mat 100% more per minute, which is 100% means twice as often.
Now, here's the question I have. I believe at least in California and in Pennsylvania, the states that we looked at for the high school data, the mat sizes, that does play a role because I think the minimum on the high school side, I think, is a 32, and I think the minimum for college is a 36-foot circle, if I'm not mistaken here. But, that obviously plays a role. But as we talked about before we started, when you're watching wrestling from the international level where there's a step-out point and the edge, the protection area is no man's land, and then you go to college, which, again, you can have a fingernail or an eyelash in the cylinder. You can be pinning a guy on another mat. That's in bounds. Whereas you get near the edge in high school, they're going to blow the whistle if their butt hits the line. So there's a couple things to consider when looking at the amount of times they're going off the mat. But I think mat size is something to look at if you boil this down to beyond the uniformity of like the state tournaments and the NCAA championships. So factors that will come into play that will create that outlier. Well, no, we go out of bounds all the time. Well, if they had a step out, well, if they had a push out, if they just call stalling right, all these arguments that we see on message boards and on Twitter and on social media and such, those are all valid points. But again, statistically, this is looking at the highest level. The mat sizes are uniform from state tournament to state tournament. You're not going to have one match at the PIAA state tournament that's a small mat, and then you're not going to have the giant, the Big Bertha, as Iowa used to call it back in the day, on another mat.
Yeah, it's wild, Jason, because I love the new college. When I say new college rule, I know it's a few years old now. It's probably over a decade old, with the out of bounds rules. And the William Mary gang was so thrilled by this. We were at nationals. I forget what year it was, but it was the first year of the rule, and we bumped into Dr. Pat McCormick, and we had Dr. McCormick explain to us the rule. And so we understood the rule then better. But it really helps the sport, I believe. That one finger of yours is in bounds. We're both in bounds.
Yeah, and the one thing this does, it does create a couple little nuances with, again, mat sizes, protection area, the 5 foot outside of the mat. I mean, you've got guys that are be 6'3", dangling on a single leg, and I mean, you're in the scorers table where your foot's still in the circle. I mean, we've got situations. I remember a match a couple years ago where. Actually, it might have been that match where Iowa State actually beat Grandview and gave Grandview its last loss 8 years ago. Eric Thompson from Grandview pinned a guy. He was in that corner section of the mat, so his toe is in the circle still. And his Iowa State opponent was like clearly, like basically in the coaches' chairs, but he wasn't off the mat onto the hardwood. So, I mean, that was one of the benefits of the rule, and Thompson had his foot and knew where he was and had the mat awareness and still had to fall. And I was like, man, he pinned him in the next county. And that was one thing that I love about the college rule. Now, granted, I also love the freestyle side of things. And again, we're not talking the freestyle rules here, but I do love the step out when the action you are pushed at, or not pushed because it's not a push. A straight on push is not a point. I'm getting on a little tangent here, but again, the action drives you out of bounds. Now, I love the fact that you can get that takedown, grab the legs, drag the toe, put the toes up at 2. I love that edge takedown. Yeah. I love that. And I also love the freestyle step out. So you can love both things and not have one against the other. Anyway.
Yeah, and when you say that about how much we both love the edge of the mat wrestling, NCAA scoring has 125% more scoring on the edge of the mat. It must be a direct correlation to the rule.
It's also, in some to that effect, I believe it's also the coaching when you get to that level, is when you're teaching the kids to drag the feet in college or in high school, whereas in college you've got enough. You don't have to just drag your toes. That supporting point. You can have your shoelaces in there, whereas in high school the knee or any supporting point is out of bounds. They're going to blow it dead there. I actually saw some footage. I think somebody was asking on one of the Facebook groups, why isn't this a fall? Well, the supporting points went from the toes to the knees. The knees were out of the circle, whereas different rule sets, so wrestlers are reacting in different ways. So I think that may also be a factor into the edge scoring rules here.
Oh, sure. You react to the rules and what your coaches are telling you, no question.
All right, so we're looking now. The next point you talk, specific scoring categories do have differences. Can you explain this?
Oh, yeah, sure. Like how the reversals are scored or how the escape are scored will have some differences, and that's for another show.
Okay.
So they're still in the same order where escapes come before reversals in points in this, but the different specifics of the moves and that have a difference.
Lastly, on this page, stalling has 137% more points in the NCAA men. I'm gonna chalk this up to just again being that much higher quality of an athlete at that level. Whereas high school kids, they don't have riding time to worry about, so they're not hanging on to a lead because they've got to build a riding time point, or they're holding on to the ankle kind of trying to cheat and get, oh, okay, you got one stall warning to give. Whereas in high school, it's still, you're going after it. You're getting after it. It's the technique's not as refined even at the state level tournaments, for example. But I would chalk that up to just being a better seasoned wrestler at that point. Like I said, 2 to 5 years older
Sure.
in these situations.
Yeah, no question.
Well, Glenn, that looks to wrap up your deep dive here on the scoring comparisons between high school and college. Wrap this up before we talk about what's going on our next show.
My biggest wrap up to this show is the best predictor of future performance is past performance.
Well, that's the title of the show. So we've come full circle. You have validated your thesis, at least statistically.
Yes.
If you've got any comments on how to do this, we can bring that up right there at the bottom corner of your screen, or if you're listening at NWCA Matt Stats. Glenn and Kevin Hazard, again, who's not with us today, will be able to answer those comments and questions. And if you've got comments and questions about anything you've seen on the last couple Matt Stats shows, hit us up. We'll see if we can bring them in and answer them on the next show, talking about it when relevant and things of that nature. So, Glenn, moving forward, our next episode, we're going to dig into some more NWCA-ness with the WIBN, the Wrestlers in Business Network. You've got a statistical analysis of the WIBN. Seriously.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. We're going to get into this on Wednesday, January 19th, 2022 at 3 p.m. It's going to be a statistical analysis of Wrestlers in Business. I'm working with Colonel Fallon, who Mike Moyer wisely has brought along to help out the Wrestlers in Business. It's going to be a statistical thing. It's not going to, tell you how to win wrestling matches or anything like that, but it shows us that we're one family, one team, one sport, all in business together.
It'll show you how to win wrestling, like to win at wrestling, not necessarily win matches.
Yes, to win at wrestling, because it's important we win at wrestling in this sport.
Yeah, that's a dad joke for those wondering. So as the mouse works up. And so, Glenn, as we've got our final thoughts here, wishing everybody out there a happy holiday season. If you're listening to this as we record on December 9th, 2021, heading to the end of 2021 into 2022, more Matt Stats with Glenn and Kevin Hazard. We'll see you next time.
See you guys next time.